I'm Emily Guy Birkin, and you're listening to Deep Thoughts About Stupid Shit. Because pop culture is still culture. And shouldn't you know what's in your head? On today's episode, I will be discussing The Addams Family and Addams Family Values, the 1990s era movies, with my sister, Tracy Guy Decker, and with you. Let's dive in.
Have you ever had something you love dismissed because it's just pop culture? What others might deem stupid shit, you know matters. You know it's worth talking and thinking about. And so do we. So come overthink with us as we delve into our deep thoughts about stupid shit.
So Trace, tell me what you remember about the Addams Family. You don't have to just confine yourself to the 1990s era movies. You could talk about the 1960s era TV show or the more recent additions to the franchise or the cartoons. Just tell me what you remember about Gomez and Morticia and their crew.
Yeah. So the Addams Family are one of those pieces of mental furniture that are like there and relatively unexamined. They're very much there. I feel like we must have watched the TV show as kids. Mm-hmm. And I know I watched the 90s era movies. Anjelica Huston, right? And Raul Julia?
Oh, yes. Yes. Dad had a crush on her.
Yeah. Well, who didn't, right?
Yeah.
And my kid really enjoyed the new Wednesday TV show. I also liked it. It was, the mystery was good and the acting was fun. Anyway, so, but mainly when I think about the Addams Family, I think about super sexy Morticia. Like, I found that whole thing, it worked for me. Like,
she looks amazing.
Yeah. I definitely one of those moments where do I want to be her or do I want to be with her? Not sure. Maybe both.
Yes. The answer is yes.
Yeah. So that comes to mind. And also one of the few things that actually has been examined in my constellation of Addams Family is the fact that it seemed absurd to our culture that a man would continue to be completely in love with his wife. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I'll just let that sit. Just let that sit. So, because they're so subversive as a pairing. She's tall and slim and he's shorter and stouter, and she seems so sophisticated and he seems so not, but they're both weird. And part of their subversion, they subvert everything, and part of their subversion is that they're still completely in love, and he's not the sort of henpecked, long-suffering husband that we have been trained to expect in pop culture. So that's the only piece that I've done any kind of thinking about. Otherwise, it just has been sort of fun, like fun furniture. And so I'm excited to hear a little bit more analysis from you. So before we get there, why are we talking about the Addams Family today?
So I remember watching the 1960s era black and white TV show, probably like in syndication on like Nickelodeon or something, when we were kids. And it was not something I had any huge affinity for. It was something I watched when it was on.
Right.
I liked the aesthetic, basically.
Right. I think that's what I mean. I think that's exactly what I mean when I say that it's like definitely there, but not examined. Yeah.
Yes. Then the 1991 film came out. So I was 12 and I just loved it. And so that led me down the path of reading all of Charles Addams's cartoons. Like I bought a whole bunch of his old cartoons and really got into the original characterization of these characters. And now, as for why I loved the movies so much, because there's 1991's Addams Family, and I believe it was 1993's Addams Family Values.
That's the one with the baby, right? And like
Yes.
Fester gets married. I watched
Yes.
that recently with you.
Yes.
Yeah.
My family has a tradition of watching it on Thanksgiving.
Right. So when I was there for Thanksgiving, we watched
Yes.
it together.
And that's because there's it doesn't take place during Thanksgiving, but Wednesday and Pugsley are at a sleepaway camp where they put on a play, and the play is a Thanksgiving play, basically.
Right, I remember now.
And so Pugsley is the turkey going, eat me. So I think this is a really good insight into who I am in terms of my taste and style, in that I am a hopeless romantic, but with an edge. I love the idea of being like subversive and like very much going against what is considered feminine, what is considered family, but at the same time, really clinging to the idea of we love each other and accept each other for all of our weirdnesses and encourage each other in all of our weirdnesses. So I think the reason why I just loved it so much, and not just that, the fact that Barry Sonnenfeld, who was the director, and this was his directorial debut, the first Addams Family, and then the writers, the entire film took it seriously by casting Anjelica Huston, who is like Hollywood royalty, and Raul Julia, who was like, you know, Shakespearean trained, amazing actor as Morticia and Gomez, and making it clear this is not just a kid's movie. Like, we're taking this seriously. And so, like, it felt validating in a way for me. So that's why I really, really loved it growing up. And why I actually, even though I know I would like Wednesday, I haven't watched it because I have so much affection for this version. And I have so much affection for Raul Julia, who passed away very soon after Addams Family Values came out. And so there's a part of me that kind of doesn't want to see another version, even though I have no doubt that
Luis Guzman, isn't it?
Luis Guzman. Yes, Luis Guzman
He does a
is amazing.
great job.
Yeah,
he
I
does a
have
great job.
no
You
doubt
will
that he's
love
amazing.
it.
Yeah,
You will love it.
I'm sure that I will. And I think once I get into the right mindset, there's also some weirdness with, like, I associate Dad a little bit with the movies, and then the fact that Raul Julia passed away and Dad is gone. There's, you know, I have neuroses. But there's a lot in there that I very much just hold dear as a part of my childhood, and then hold dear as part of who I am as a person. In the I call myself whimsical with an edge. Or there's Tracy bought me a gift. It's a coffee mug that says I'm a ray of fucking sunshine. And that's why I loved Addams Family.
She is. She's a delicate fucking flower.
So that's why we're talking about it today. So it's a little tough to kind of get into the details of it because there are so many iterations, and there's not really any. I mean, there are plots in these two movies, but that's not really what matters. So I'll just kind of go through who the characters are and what we know about them. Cool. So the Addams family, they live in this grand old mansion that is like covered in cobwebs and looks dilapidated, but is like this gorgeous grand old mansion. The family is Gomez, who is the father, who has this pencil mustache and dresses in like silk dressing gowns or jackets, always dressed to the nines.
And pinstripe suits, I feel like, yeah?
Yes. Yeah. Pinstripe suits are very much from the Charles Addams. It's when he's lounging, he'll wear a dressing gown. Gomez is deeply in love with his wife, Morticia, in this version played by Anjelica Huston, who is this tall, statuesque, very pale, beautiful woman with long flowing black hair, and always wears a long black dress that is kind of form-fitting and has like a train that kind of follows behind, and always bright red lipstick. She is just style goals. So those are the parents. It depends on which version you're watching, but there is Uncle Fester, who in the versions that I grew up with is Gomez's brother. There are other versions where he's a great uncle. There's other versions where he's related to Morticia, but Uncle Fester in these two is Gomez's big brother,
And
who
that's
is
Christopher Lloyd, right?
Christopher Lloyd. Yes, he is pale, bald, wears like long tunics that look almost like a dress. Jackie Coogan, who played him in the 1960s version, is the one who started the thing where he'd put a light bulb in his mouth and it would light up.
I didn't realize that. That's cool.
Yeah, yeah. And he also, Jackie Coogan's version, this is something that I remember very distinctly because I thought it was cool, would sleep on a bed of nails. That was his bed. So there's Uncle Fester. Then Morticia and Gomez have two children, eventually three. There's Wednesday, the eldest, who is their daughter, who has black pigtails and wears like a black dress with a little white collar, like white Peter Pan collar, and who has always a like flat affect, like she never smiles. Then there's Pugsley, her little brother, who is usually shown wearing a striped shirt. He's a little bit, I don't know how to describe it, but he's a little bit husky. He takes after his Uncle Fester a little bit. And then they have a third child, which is actually also directly from Charles Addams, that they named Pubert, as in puberty.
Hubert?
Pubert.
Wednesday, Pugsley, and Pubert?
Pubert. Poor Pubert. And Pubert has, he takes after his father. He's got a little mustache.
Mustache.
He's got the mustache.
Like as a toddler.
As a
baby.
Newborn, he has a mustache. And then there is, again, it depends on which version you're watching. There is Mama or Grandmama, depending on who's talking to her, who is in the movie versions that I saw, is Morticia's mother, who lives with them and likes to cook. She likes to cook things that are pretty awful, eyeballs and things like that. And then rounding out the family, there is Lurch, who is their manservant. He's played by Carol Stryken, I think is how you pronounce his name, who is a 7-foot-tall Dutch character actor in this version. I don't know who played him in the 1960s film, TV show rather. Then there is Thing, which is a disembodied hand, which that was one of the really big like draws of the 1990s, was that Thing was actually could move around, whereas in the 1960s he was just
like in a box.
Yeah, that would hand over like, Thing, the mail please, and that was it. And then there's some other, like Cousin It makes a cameo basically in both films. Cousin It was just covered in hair, like just hair,
just
all the way
long
down.
hair.
Yeah, usually with a hat.
Yeah.
And then when speaking was like, which I do not recall if that is something from the cartoon or if that was made up for the TV show and then recreated in the movies. So that's the cast of characters. Charles Addams wrote these characters as in the way that we see them on screen, which is they are this cohesive unit who see nothing wrong with the way that they live, but they get a lot of, not pushback, but people are horrified to see how they live. So they are living in the real modern world. And it just is, people are dumbstruck by the way they live.
And they don't like, there's like no code switching. Like they don't know why the other people, like that's part of the charm of it. Like I remember, was it from the 90s movies where like she's Wednesday selling lemonade and someone says, does it have real lemons? And then the other person wants to sell her Girl Scout cookies. And she says, does it have real Girl Scouts in it? Was that the 90s?
Yes.
I vaguely remember Dad being really tickled by that joke.
Yes. Well, there's a similar one in Addams Family Values where they're introducing the kids to other kids at the camp and parents are there dropping everybody off. And so Morticia says about Wednesday, oh, she's at that really special age where girls can only think of one thing. And the mother of the other child goes, boys? And Wednesday goes, murder. And Morticia just looks on fondly.
Yeah.
So so that it's a very classic kind of fish out of water, no code switching, and the complete lack of caring that other people don't understand. And it's unclear whether they notice and don't care or if they just don't even notice. That is not entirely clear, and that's part of the charm of it as well. It's like, are they in on the joke or are they not? It doesn't matter. They are 100% themselves, and they're happy to be themselves. So that's something that I think is delightful and was a great lesson for kids in the 60s and the 90s and today. It was like, be yourself, 100% who you are. Go for it. It's great.
This maybe isn't the right spot for this, but I just can't help but I recently saw on Tumblr this tiny little snippet that was a Addams Family Frankenstein crossover that Lurch is actually Frankenstein's monster. Did you see this?
No.
Somebody was suggesting, it was just a Tumblr post, but they were suggesting that Frankenstein's monster, was running from people and they were yelling. And then, he found the Addams and they just were like, oh, hey, you want a job? And then he became part of the family and
yeah.
He found his people and how special that was. And other Tumblrinas were just wow, I never thought that, that this would be what would tug at my heartstrings. But something about finding your people.
Yes. Well, and in fact, this is something that I've seen a couple of times. So in Addams Family Values, which, by the way, was making a joke on the fact that Republicans were, and I can't remember who it was, but someone said, the reason why there's problems in Los Angeles is because we've lost touch with family values. And I'm sure you remember that. I remember that. But people nowadays who were children at the time or who weren't even born yet would not recognize the irony of that name.
The topical nature of it, yeah.
But in that film, Fester meets and marries Joan Cusack's Debbie Jelinski, who turns out to be a serial murderer. She's a black widow. She finds lonely rich bachelors, marries them, kills them on the honeymoon, and takes their money. And she's unable to kill Fester because he's an Addams. And at the end, she is confronting all of the Addamses, and she has them up in their attic where they have a electric chair. And she's got them all tied and with whatever you call that cap on, and she's about to electrocute all of them, and she's telling the story of how she became a serial murderer. And they are so supportive. They are so sympathetic. And if she had been able to just stop for a minute, they would have been like, you're one of us, join us. They actually have no issue with the way that she is torturing Fester. Their problem is Pastel, really? How they makes him dress in the house that he is. I can forgive all of the taking our brother away from us and torturing him in a sexual haze and killing all of these men and, using your body to manipulate. All of that is so forgivable, but Pastel, really? And so it kind of shows the issue with Debbie is that she was trying to fit in mainstream culture. And if she had just embraced who she was, she could have found a happy family in the Addams.
Boy.
Yes. So there are a couple things I want to talk about in regards to specifically these two versions of the Addams Family.
All right, let's hear it.
So let's start with what you were talking about the fact that they are a happily married couple. Now, Raul Julia does not look like Chaz Adams's drawings of Gomez. And by the way, actually, none of these characters had names until the 1960s TV show.
Oh.
They were just recurring characters in Charles Adams's, because it was one panel strips. It was sight gags, basically.
Right.
So, and the David Levy, I think is the name of the guy who was the showrunner for the original show. He collaborated with Charles Addams and got Charles Addams to name them.
Oh, I see. So the names are
Yeah,
canon.
they are canon,
Well, or
but
I
they
mean, they'd
weren't.
be canon anyway. They're from Addams.
Yes, they're
Yeah.
from the originator. The way that Charles Addams had drawn Gomez was not necessarily a very handsome man. He's a bit shorter than Morticia. He's a bit stout. And actually, Luis Guzman is like kind of a dead ringer
Yeah.
for the cartoon version.
Yeah.
Whereas Raul Julia is just beautiful. He is just a beautiful man. Like, I didn't realize because I was so focused on how gorgeous Morticia looks, but they
Yeah.
are just a beautiful matched set. So, and then there was the man who played Gomez, and I'm not going to remember his name, in the 1960s, looked a little bit like Raul Julia. He was he was slender, might have been shorter than Morticia, I'm not sure. You know, pencil mustache, pinstripe suit, all of that. So there was a little bit of subversion in the cartoons that you kind of lose in these two film versions. But you're absolutely right, especially in the 1960s, the idea that a long married couple is still so in love, where like all she has to do is say something in French and he starts kissing her hand all the way up her arm.
Mm-hmm.
And she's super into it too. This is not like, get off me or anything like that. They just really, really are into each other, which is lovely. I really do appreciate that. And I appreciate that the subversion is that, like, you know, mainstream culture expects men to be henpecked or miserable or cheating or whatever, and women
Disinterested
to be
in some
nags.
way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I appreciate that, where it's like kind of pointing out like how toxic that is in the mainstream culture. There was a joke in the Addams Family that I had no memory of. I rewatched it last night that undercuts that. It's just one joke. It's a throwaway. So the Addams Family movie, the plot is that the Addamses' longtime lawyer, played by Dan Hedaya, his name is Tully Alford. He's married to a woman named Margaret. They're very unhappy. And when they are arriving, or like there's a regular meeting where Tully meets with Gomez to go over finances and accounts and monthly expenditures and things like that, Margaret is like haranguing Tully, telling him like, you know, you need to make sure that you are, you know, get some money, blah, blah, blah. These are your last clients. And she says to him, why did I marry you? And he responds, because I said yes. So the joke being that she asked him. And so that very much undercuts the lovely message of like, it is possible to have this equal relationship in marriage, because it gives the sense that like, but only if he asks or something.
Let me just make sure I'm hearing what you're saying. So you're suggesting that the message in Tully and Margaret is that a woman who leads causes an unhappy home.
Yes.
And that's the message that's really undercutting the potential. So the idea then, I think, taken together, I'm sorry, I'm just spelling this out to be
No, go ahead.
clear. Taken together, the suggestion is like this long-term loving relationship is possible only when she knows who wears the pants.
Yes. And you see that again in Addams Family Values, because Debbie pursues Fester.
Right. And she's a psychopath.
Who messes up the potential for their happiness because she's focused on mainstream success and mainstream acceptance. Whereas if she had followed Fester's lead, they could have been happy. You also get in the first film, at the beginning of the first film, Fester has been missing for 25 years. Gomez and Fester had gotten into a huge argument, and Fester left, and then he's been gone for 25 years, and they believe him to be dead. And so they have a seance every year on the same date to try to get in touch with him from the beyond. Tully, who knows Gomez and has seen pictures of Fester, one of his clients who was a con artist, he meets her son, who is a dead ringer for Fester. And it turns out it's because it is Fester. He has amnesia. And apparently, originally, the way they wrote it was that he was going to be an imposter. He just turned out to be a good person. But all of the cast did not like that. And they had Christina Ricci, who was 10, go and make the case to Barry Sonnenfeld. Like, no, he should really be Fester. He should be the Addams that we know he is. Which is adorable. So
she's in Wednesday, by the way. Christina Ricci's in Wednesday, by the way.
Is she? Oh,
yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, she's like a teacher at the school for supernatural people.
Okay. So the mother in that, her name is Abigail, but she pretends to be someone named Dr. Pinderschloss. So, but Abigail is this overbearing mother who is manipulative towards Fester, who she calls Gordon. So altogether, you get a great it's not a great view of women.
Yeah.
But with that said, Morticia is a phenomenal character. The film passes the Bechdel test. There are multiple women with names, and they speak to each other about men and other things. Like, there are many things that they discuss. So there's a part of Addams Family that really stuck with me from the time I was a kid, which is when basically what they do is, since Fester is the older child in the Addams, and the way that the entailment works for the Addams Family estate is the executor is the oldest living Addams relative. And so that means basically Fester owns everything once he comes back. And so they kick out the Gomez and the rest of the family with Tully's help. There's a judge who lives across the way who hates the Addamses. So like he refuses to the appeal. And so the Addamses are living in a motel trying to get by after having lost everything. And Gomez is just hilariously depressed.
Like Schitt's Creek.
Yes. Well, and in fact, Raul Julia, I saw something. He said he loved this script in part because Gomez is such a dynamic character. Even his depression is dynamic.
Huh.
So there's a point where everyone is sleeping except for Morticia. And it's this tiny, tiny little motel room with only 2 twin beds. And so Morticia and Gomez are on one twin bed. Grandmama and Wednesday are on another. There's like just naked springs on the floor, Lurch sleeping on that, and Pugsley sleeping on top of him, and then Thing on top of Pugsley. And so Morticia, with the moonlight across her eyes, because that's how she's always lit, Morticia is looking around at her husband, her mother, her children, her beloved friends, and is like, this is unsustainable. This cannot be. And so she walks back to the mansion and says, I need to speak to Fester. And for one thing, it's like 90s films, you don't necessarily see female agency. But the strength of this character, and I know it's a ridiculous movie, but the strength of this character in saying, like, I need to make this right, and I will do what I can. They also have a hilarious moment where she is at a jobs agency trying to find work. And it's the fish out of water thing where she's in the all black and pale, and it's just a normal woman. And the woman is saying like, well, it's okay if your work as a stay-at-home mom has lots of value. I'm sure we can find something for you. So the next thing you see is her at a preschool reading Hansel and Gretel to the children and making them cry. She also is the one who's like, we're not in a great place. Things are not what we wanted them to be. Our beloved brother has betrayed us and we've lost our home. But you know what? We are Addamses. We can do this. So like, you definitely are given with one hand with Morticia. I mean, she is strong and smart and loving and just wonderful. She's a wonderful character who at every turn wants to ensure the well-being of her children and her family, including in Addams Family Values, when Gomez, he gets depressed again because Fester refuses to see him after marrying Debbie. And everything starts to go through this transformation where the baby goes from dark-haired with the mustache to having blonde curls and
big cheeks
and like rosy cheeks. And like the nursery is no longer all black. It's now like, clouds and what you expect a normal nursery to be. And you see Morticia reading to Pubert. I think it's The Cat in the Hat. And so she's reading it and she's like so upset to be reading this normal book. And she's like, do they die? Alas, no. But she keeps doing it because her child likes it. It's so positive. It's a ray of fucking sunshine. She does what is going to be best for her family, even if it's difficult for her or painful for her. And like she, at every turn, completely accepts the people she loves for who they are and does not ask them to be anything else. So even when Gomez is upset or depressed, she doesn't try to push him to be anything other than what he is. She tries to figure out a way to improve the situation. So yeah, that was a long way of saying it's a little mixed on women.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I do think it's worth noting that even the positive one that you're lifting up is a mother, right? And the way that we see that she's positive is that she sacrifices for her family, which is a very specific and limiting positive role.
Yes.
For women.
Yes. And that's a tough one for me to unpack in some ways, because I have known since toddlerhood that I wanted to be a parent. Like there has never been a moment of doubt in that for me. Like I'm not someone who was like, oh, okay, well, people have kids, so I'll have kids. I'm not like, I feel pressured to have kids. It was like, this is part of who I am, and I cannot imagine my life differently. And had I not been able to have kids, I would have had kids around me in some way. That sounds creepy.
I gotcha.
Not like Hansel and Gretel, witch type way. I would have found ways to incorporate parenting into my life, even if I had been unable to be a biological parent. So that makes it tough for me to unpack these limiting positive views of women because I so strongly identify with them.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that. And also, like, I can't imagine my life any other way. And also, like, it's not the be all and end all of who I am. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the way I relate to unpacking it a bit, is that there are other ways that even mothers can be strong. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But we don't get that from this specific example. I guess that's what I'm feeling.
Yeah. So there is one scene that I had forgotten and I loved in Addams Family. They go to the children's school. The kids go to public school. for like there's a play is what they call it, but it's basically a sketch show because they've got a bunch of kids singing, and then Pugsley and Wednesday have put together a like fencing scene from Shakespeare that Fester helps them to make like completely bloody. It's fantastic. So they get there, and Wednesday's teacher grabs Morticia and says, "Oh, I was hoping to talk to you. Wednesday's a wonderful student. She's a real asset to have in class, but I am a little concerned." And so she shows there's a wall that they have put together where everyone brought in a picture of a hero. And so this was 1991. So George H.W. Bush was president. And he's like, see, for instance, little Katie brought in a picture of the president. And Morticia goes, "Oh, have you spoken to her parents?" The teacher just kind of like moves on. She's like, "Well, and this is who Wednesday brought in. It's Calpurnia Addams." And she's like, "Yes, that was her great 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 grandmother. She was burned at the stake as a witch because she had, I think it was like seduced 3 priests." And Morticia is like, and so Wednesday is just so taken by this story of our ancestress. And then she goes, "But I've told her, college first." Like, I'm sitting there going like, okay, well, if I were an elementary school teacher, I'd be like, rock on, little Willow Wednesday, yes. And again, it's that subversion, this like the like, oh, isn't it adorable that the president is their hero? I'm like, it's a 10-year-old. I'm not expecting them to have any kind of understanding of geopolitics. But, having an ancestor who was burned at the stake for having seduced priests, that is kick ass. But college first.
It's really interesting. We have talked many times on this show about the fact that both horror and comedy subvert your expectations. That's how they work. That's the mechanism, is subversion, for both horror and for comedy. It's interesting that these characters who are not horror insofar as they horrify, they don't. But they do kind of wear the trappings, the accessories of horror. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then are used to comic effect. I'm finding that very interesting, that the Addams Family are kind of trying to hold both of those two examples of subversion, which is really interesting.
Well, and what's fascinating is that it forces us to look at what's horrific about mainstream culture.
Yeah.
Like the fact that Morticia says, "Oh, have you talked to their parents about the picture of George H.W. Bush?" Which, if you have any knowledge, that's a fair question.
Right, right.
It's also, there are things that the Addamses do that are really not socially acceptable, not because it just doesn't fit mainstream, but because it's just kind of rude. So something that Gomez likes to do is he hits golf balls off the roof of the mansion, and they often go all the way across their cemetery and their pond and like through the window of the judge's house. And like the first one we see lands in his bowl of cereal in the morning. Mm-hmm. So, on the one hand, like, what the Addamses do doesn't hurt anyone, and so people need to just stop being so uptight about it. On the other hand, this guy keeps having to replace his windows.
Yeah, it's not cool.
I mean, like, that's rude.
Right. I'm thinking about the animated version that came out a couple of years ago that we watched at my house, and the sort of leaning into the subversion of what's toxic about mainstream culture. That's like the through line in that one, right? Mm-hmm. Where they're in this sort of planned town that the mansion kind of sits over, and there's this character who's kind of like a really mean Martha Stewart, like a really mean and controlling Martha Stewart, and it's all on TV. And Wednesday befriends this woman's daughter, and this kid is just like totally controlled, based on what it will look like. But it turns out like everybody has weird secrets, you know, like the one woman who likes to keep her underwear in the freezer because she likes it.
Sometimes it gets hot.
She just likes cold underwear, I guess. And like different things in
Yeah.
the mean Martha Stewart has cameras and everybody, because it's like a planned community. And so she gets kind of run out of town, and they all embrace the Addamses. But that kind of through line of their extreme weirdness, revealing the toxicity of mainstream culture, especially vis-a-vis how it appears to other people.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like the existence of the Addams completely undercuts and their happiness, and their like what you pointed out, like their embracing of who they are completely undercuts the notion of keeping up with the Joneses.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And the fact that they don't have to. So one thing that I found interesting that I had kind of forgotten about the first movie until I watched it last night is it's very clearly a pastiche of many of Charles Addams's single panel cartoons. So there's a lot of sight gags that are just Charles Addams's, including at the very end, it is Halloween and they're having a little party, and they're like, well, what should we play? It's Halloween. Should we, bob for apples? And Fester says, let's play Wake the Dead. Go get your shovel, because digging's half the fun. Because they have their family cemetery is right next door, next to the house. So as Fester and the children and their cousin It ends up marrying Margaret, the one who was married to Tully, who'd asked him, Tully ends up dying. And so Margaret has met cousin It and is taken by him. Anyway, so they're all off doing that. And Morticia has been knitting. And at the door, like Gomez and Morticia are watching them all play Wake the Dead. And Morticia says, Gomez, I have news. And she holds up what she's knitting. And again, this is a straight out of Charles Addams. It's a baby onesie with 3 legs. And Gomez is delighted. He's like, is it true? And she's, yes. And it ends with them kissing. And so like that right there's something so subversively wonderful about that, because like she is knitting something with 3 legs. So they are not having a normal baby. Now they end up having a normal baby, but they're not necessarily having a normal baby. That's what Charles Addams was doing in the original cartoon where he drew that. And Gomez and Morticia couldn't be more delighted. They don't know what it's going to look like. She thinks it's going to have 3 legs, and she's delighted. And so like that to me is, I wonder if the Addams Family is beloved, if it's meaningful to the LGBTQ community, because that is showing like what parents who truly love each other and love their children would react to whoever they end up getting, and would be perfectly like if Wednesday were to, at 15 say, you know what, I want to be Odin, and cut their hair and change their pronouns, they'd be like, capital, old man.
Yeah.
Have a cigar. They'd be delighted. Like, does that make you happy? Fantastic. So I think that is part of what makes it so like wholesome horror.
Yeah. Yeah. And the fact that, I mean, talk about pointing out the toxicity of mainstream culture. Like the fact that it takes this super weirdos to completely accept one another and their families.
Yes.
It's super weird to do that.
It's, like, well, what will people think? And that's actually, as I mentioned in Addams Family Values, that's really Debbie's sin, is she cares what people think rather than that she's homicidal maniac.
Right. Right. Whew. Well, we have been deep thinking for a minute. Did we cover what you wanted to cover about the Addams Family?
I do want to talk a little bit about diversity. Is a little odd. Now, granted, it's about a family, so, And I did notice there is a party that they have in Addams Family where they invite the entire Addams clan, and there is a black member of the family.
One.
So one. Now, in 1991, that seems pretty big. Just having that person in the background.
Yeah. And Snoop Dogg played Cousin It.
No.
Oh, in the new one. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
In the animated thing, Snoop Dogg is Cousin It.
I was be like, no, it's John Chamberlain. I think that's his name. Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely Snoop Dogg in the animated. He voices it.
Sure. Does he still do?
I don't remember.
So there's that aspect of it that I wish were a little bit different. Now, to be fair, though, Gomez has always been Latino,
right?
Even
Is
though
Raul
his last name is Addams. Raul Julia is Puerto Rican.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, I don't know if the man playing Gomez from the 60s was white or Latino or what, but I mean that is something that Charles Addams wrote into or drew into his characters.
And he named him Gomez.
And he named him Gomez. So he had this in mind from the beginning. That is one thing I do wish we had seen more of. And you do see a little bit more of it in Addams Family Values. There's a joke where the Camp Chippewa, where the kids go, is very much like sunshiny, happy, like all blonde and blue-eyed kids, except for the outcasts. And they make it clear, like there's a kid whose name is Esther and is clearly coded as Jewish. There's a kid who gets around in a wheelchair, and then there's a kid who is black, and the head of the camp named Becky, she's like, Jamal. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name.
Jamal. As if it's a hard name. That's funny.
So there is a little bit of acknowledgement of the world, and Jamal and the rest of the outcasts are part of Wednesday and Pugsley's crew.
Yeah.
So there is that sense of like, you're welcome in the Addams Family too, which is lovely.
Yeah.
But it would be nice if there was more.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Should I try and synthesize back to you?
I would love that.
I'll try. I will try. Well, I'll start with just sort of the facts that it's interesting that this franchise, I'm not sure what to call it, this franchise has such an interesting like history of iteration, from single panel sight gags without names from Charles Addams through a 1960s TV show, which we both remember watching probably in syndication on Nickelodeon, through these 1990s films, which were very important to you. And now there was like an animated thing that I remember seeing, and there's two recently actually, because I remember my kid really liked them. And now there's this Netflix show Wednesday that's streaming. So obviously there's something about this concept, these characters, that people find appealing, compelling. You have suggested that what might be compelling about them is the ways in which they are so fully themselves and fully accepting of other people's selves. So that, do they not know that other people think they're weird, or do they not care? Does it matter? They are fully themselves and they accept one another completely. So much so that just at the end of our conversation, you pointed out that the so-called outcasts at the summer camp were kids who were not white, het, cis, able-bodied, Christian, and were accepted as Addams, more or less. The sort of picture of women that we get from the Addams Family is a mixed bag, because on the one hand, we have Morticia Addams, who is gorgeous and powerful and loving. And on the other hand, we have examples, especially from the 1990s movies, of women who when they attempt to be leaders, especially in romantic pairings, things go poorly, and or they are viewed as somehow less than worthy. We talked about the ways in which the Addams family really kind of leans on the mechanism of subversion, which is the key mechanism in both horror and humor. And the Addamses kind of lean on both by kind of dressing in the garments of horror in order to be funny, by pointing out how truly toxic and maybe horrible mainstream culture is, especially vis-a-vis caring about what other people think. And that pointing out of how toxic mainstream culture is happened in like over and over and over again. So it happens with the loving marriage after many years of these two people who are truly just continue to be into one another. It happens in the family that fully accepts one another despite their three legs or, Fester's light bulb thing or whatever it might be. Even Debbie, the sister-in-law, who, tortures Fester and took him away. But Pastel is a step too far. Pastel is a step too far. One thing that we said from like at the start of our conversation was just how friggin' sexy Morticia is. I mean, especially as Anjelica Huston, but in general, the character like just reads as like super sexy.
Mm-hmm. And this is something where women are expected to be so many things. So I don't know that this is actually subversive, but the idea that a woman who is a devoted mother and very good mother is also still remarkably attractive is one of those things where it could be a subversion or it could be just expectations as usual. Like there's it's kind of a both end thing. And in part, I think what I like about it is that she doesn't dress for Gomez exactly. Like I know he likes what she wears, but she dresses because that's how she likes to look.
Well, I think
there's just something great about that, but also possibly not.
Well, I think insofar as it might set up expectations that one would be hard to meet, it's not great. But I do think it is interesting as a middle-aged woman, right, that Addams gave us the maiden mother crone archetypes with Wednesday, Morticia, and Grandmama.
Mm-hmm. But
usually in that trilogy, like, we don't get a particularly sexy mother, right? She's mm-hmm. the sex is behind her mm-hmm. now that mm-hmm. she's become a mother. And that is subversive of the way that those archetypes are used. Mm-hmm. So I mm-hmm. think that is an interesting thing to note. It also can set up an unhealthy expectation that a woman mm-hmm. be superwoman. Mm-hmm. But both can be true. Both can be true.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not only that she's the mother, she's a devoted and good mother, and also a loving and monogamous wife, mm-hmm. and mm-hmm. is still sexy. And mm-hmm. that actually is quite subversive, I think, in the way that we've been given female archetypes.
And a devoted daughter, and it's a happy family, including in-laws.
Yeah.
Like that is a happy extended family. Whereas especially in the 60s, the idea of grandmama living with her son-in-law, that would have been like ripe for so many like mother-in-laws, am I right?
Yeah.
Bullshit jokes. Whereas it's just, no, like of course your mother lives with us. This is, she helps with the kids. You are happier when she's here. You don't have to worry about her. She is hale and hearty and enjoying herself and loves cooking for us. Like, of course. And some of this is like, that's American culture as opposed to,
European.
Elsewhere in the world.
Yeah.
But Charles Addams was American.
Yeah. So on the same vein as Morticia just being sort of sexy, I do want to talk about also the aesthetic of the Addams, which I think is part of what appealed to you about it.
Yes.
Back in the 90s. Like there's just something like that kind of goth aesthetic. It's also very funny.
It's goth whimsy.
Yeah. That I think is worth noting. And that comes directly from the single panel strips, right? Like that's
Which
not
is why I loved, like I bought like 4 or 5 of the books because they were New Yorker cartoons, and then he had put some together intentionally and other people had put them together posthumously for him. And I loved the art. I loved the artwork, and the film really went back to his artwork. And so specifically the cemetery looks just like his drawings.
I think the juxtaposition of those two things is also part of this. There's so much subversion of expectations in Addams Family, and it's the underpinning of a lot of the subversion is actually that juxtaposition just in the visual, right? And so that the idea that something could be both kind of goth and creepy and dark and also whimsical and funny is already subversive. And that helps to kind of just undergird, I think, all of it. So those are the highlights that I remember. What did I forget to mention that you want to make sure that we kind of highlight before we say goodbye?
I don't think there's anything that you missed. There's 1 or 2 like just interesting facts that I think. So for instance, this I did not realize. Apparently, they wanted Anjelica Huston's eyes to like slant upward, which is part of the reason why she looks so ethereal. And so they had these like plastic elastic bands like that were see-through in the corner of her eye and then tied behind her head that were unbearably painful.
Oh my gosh.
Apparently. Yeah. And
so when she's like tearing up at different points, it's real.
Probably. And apparently like there was this kind of catch-22 because if she kept them in while she had like while she ate lunch, it would cause her to have like a serious headache, but it took so long to take them out and put them back in. So I only mention that because we are so taken with how gorgeous she is.
Yeah.
And it is the pain that women are expected to put up with because Raul Julia and Christopher Lloyd was wearing a padded, I hate to call it a fat suit, but he was wearing a suit to make him look girthier than he is, which I imagine is not super comfortable to act in. And, there are things that they had to do, costuming and stuff like that. But the pain.
Yeah.
And I think that is something worth thinking about. Now, if they wanted the same effect today, I'm sure they'd use CGI.
Yeah, probably.
And they did that. And then 2 years later, she came back and went through it again. Yeah. So, which, I mean, she's a professional. She really liked the character. She actually thought, oh gosh, I can't remember who it was. There are other actresses interested in the character, and she didn't think she'd get it, which I can't even imagine anyone else. And, I mean, that's part of the job. Like, you have weird makeup crap when you're an actor. But I just wanted to tell that story because of how much we were struck by her beauty and what is expected of not only just women in general, women in fiction, actresses compared to their male counterparts.
Yeah.
It's worth noting.
Yeah.
I will say, if anyone's watching this on video, I just got contacts today. And so I was like, well, if I'm going to do that, I'm gonna Morticia it up a little bit and put on some eyeshadow. I just need someone to shine a moonlight across my eyes.
Just that strip of moonlight.
Just strip of moonlight for wherever I'm standing.
Yeah. All right. Well, this was fun. Thank you for bringing your deep thoughts about the Addams Family and Addams Family values. So next time?
Yeah. So next time, a bit of a pattern interrupt. We're having my friend Scott Kennemore is coming on to talk about the film Event Horizon. Now, I think you're not super familiar with that film.
Tabula rasa on this one. So
Okay.
I will, before we record, I will watch the trailer, but I understand it's horror, and I'm such a wimp. I'm really such a wimp when it comes to horror. So I probably won't watch it before we record.
Oh, that's quite all right.
I do think it's worth noting, listeners, that Scott Kennemore is a published horror author in his own right. And so though I think Event Horizon didn't make a huge dent in pop culture generally, Scott himself is a horror writer, author, published. And so part of what's interesting about having him come to talk about this is like as an influence on someone who later will contribute to pop culture. So that's also a pattern interrupt for us, which I'm excited to investigate. Yeah.
It's going to be cool.
So I want to share one quick listener comment, which from my friend Christoph about the Trading Places episode. Christoph says, my absolute favorite movie ever. Definitely deserves a deep look. So thanks, Christoph. So folks, if you have deep thoughts about our deep thoughts or any of the things about which we have deep thoughts, we want to hear it.
Or if we've missed anything, because I'm sure that we do.
Absolutely.
We'd love to hear from you.
Help us fill in the gaps. You can reach us at guygirlsmedia@gmail.com, or you can head to our website, guygirlsmedia.com, or come find us on socials. We are both under our own names on several of the sites. So that's Tracy with an IE, and I do use a hyphen, and Emily does not use a hyphen.
And Birkin is also IE, like BIRKEN. People struggle with that.
We are also on TikTok and Instagram as Guy Girls Media. So we look forward to seeing you there or right back here next week.
Yes. And remember, sharing is caring. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend.
Do you like stickers? Sure, we all do. If you head over to guygirlsmedia.com/sign-up and share your address with us, we'll send you a sticker. It really is that easy. But don't wait, there's a limited quantity. Thanks for listening. Our theme music is Professor Umlaut by Kevin MacLeod from Incompetech.com. Find full music credits in the show notes. Until next time, remember, pop culture is still culture. And shouldn't you know what's in your head?